Hello, everyone. Sorry for the momentary technical difficulty. We were having some problems going live today. I don't know what's up. My name is Jamie Hinkle. I'm the Learning and Inclusion Coordinator at PFLAG National, Manager at PFLAG National. My pronouns are she and her. I'm having a great day so far, can you tell? Thank you so much for joining us for something to talk about live. As always, I am going to introduce Jean Marie Nevada, who's going to lead our conversation today.
Jamie, time is an illusion. Technology is not our friend. None of it matters. And it's the 27th of July, September, October, November, March.
Yeah, and I'm about 24 hours away from a week-long vacation, so I think my brain has gone on vacation already. So
I'm excited for you, but I don't know what I'm going to do solo. Don't leave me, Jamie, but I know you need to. Fine, go.
All right, well, have fun, and I will be back soon.
Thank you. Hey everybody, my name is Jean Marie Nevada. I'm the Director of Learning and Inclusion at PFLAG National. My pronouns are she and her, or if you speak Spanish, ella. And every single week we get together to talk about something related to LGBTQ equality and inclusion. And this week we have a really, really interesting article that appeared in the Daily Universe, which was that recent study found that nearly 1,000 BYU students identified as LGBTQ, which was very, very interesting news. The article is available on our website along with the questions that we are going to use at straightforequality.org/discussion series. And to have this conversation, I am so very lucky to have 3 guests today, all of whom bring really interesting pieces to this discussion. So let's bring them in, hear about them, and then get into our conversation today. And it looks like there we are. There we are. Yay. Technology is our friend. It doesn't hate us. I was having my panic moment. Hello, everybody. So Bradley Talbot, Chelsea Gibbs, Rebecca Simpson-Craft. I am so glad to see all of you. Thank you for being here so much. Because you all, I know, are going to really help people understand what this means and I think where things are going. So very quickly, as a first round, maybe starting with Bradley and then Rebecca and then Chelsea, could you just give people a quick introduction to who you are and maybe what's bringing you into today's conversation besides I sent an email begging?
Yeah, for sure. My name is Bradley Talbot. I use he, him pronouns. I'm a gay student at BYU, so I'm part of that 1,000 LGBTQ plus individuals at BYU. I'm the founder of an organization called Color the Campus, and recently we lit the Y, which is a historic kind of monument that BYU has, in rainbow colors, and so that got a lot of attention, and I feel like that's part of why I'm here today, is to talk a little bit about that and what that means to the LGBTQ plus community at BYU.
Thank you. Rebecca?
Okay, and I'm Rebecca Craft. I come today from Southern California. I'm a BYU alumna twice over, and I come to this conversation mainly as a parent. I have a gay son and have been very involved in LGBTQ outreach and efforts within the LDS or Mormon tradition. So just really happy to be here.
Thank you. And Chelsea?
Hi, I'm Chelsea. I use she, her pronouns, and I'm queer. I graduated from BYU almost a decade ago and had the opportunity to return to my old department as a teacher when I got my master's, but at that point I had come out, sort of. I was quasi out, and after a semester I decided, I can't really stay here and live the life that I want to live, even though I loved my department. But I've stayed very involved with the LDS sort of LGBT Venn diagram ever since. It's got a special place in my heart.
Thank you. So, I think a lot of people understand bits and pieces of this conversation. I think a lot of people also have a lot of misunderstanding around this conversation. So I'm going to throw out the first question, and I'll just say whoever gets to this one first, we'll start there, which is, can we talk a little bit about the relationship between the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints and the LGBTQ community? Because there definitely has been an evolution. There has been change that has happened. So who would like to start by talking a little bit about where things are right now?
I can jump in really quick. like a lot of more conservative or fundamentalist churches like evangelicals or Orthodox Catholics, we have a many ways very sad and heartbreaking history with the LGBTQ community. And so there has been a lot of progress that just for example, within my lifetime or within the last 25 years, the church has changed pretty dramatically on things like, is it a choice to be LGBTQ? Can it be cured? What are the causes? And so we mirror a lot of these things that happened in the evangelical churches and other conservative churches where we have a history of sort of ex-gay efforts and even conversion therapy, and also like excommunicating people who were LGBTQ and so forth. So a lot of that has really, really changed. And maybe Chelsea or Brad can talk about what's going on now.
I think there's been a lot of change. And the reason a lot of people are talking about BYU is that as the church's sort of private university, a lot of people, see them as indicative of like what flies in one is going to be what flies in the other. And to attend BYU, all students and faculty have to sign what is called the honor code. And it's just sort of a list of rules that you promise to follow, which are all the tenets of Mormonism. So it's really not that hard if you're an active Mormon. It is hard if you're queer, though, of course. But that sort of stipulation of the honor code has changed a lot over the decades. And right before I started at BYU, actually, they made it. And I started BYU in 2008, and they had just changed the honor code to say it is acceptable for someone to identify as same-sex attracted, as long as they do not act on those desires. Prior to that, you could be expelled just for identifying as such. And I think that's indicative of what was true in the church as a whole. You could be excommunicated just for aligning yourself with people in that community. And the thing about changes like that is that they don't just like change overnight. Even culturally, they don't change overnight. So even though it was technically okay to say you were gay, like the whole time that I was in school, it was still really not acceptable to do that. And people were terrified of getting snitched on or kicked out if they talked about those things. And what's been so amazing to me to watch is to see how that has changed with younger people coming in and being like, no, this is who we are, and we refuse to be quiet. So
I sort of love that. I think that's exactly what happened.
Yeah. It's changing.
And Bradley, you're on campus now. So because I was reading all about the honor code and some of the changes and how that whole thing played out. So what are you seeing? I mean, how does this evolution look as somebody who's very much in the middle of this?
Yeah, so I've been attending BYU for 4 years now, and it's crazy because I think back to my freshman year, and I never would have thought that I would even be out, that I would be like so vocal and so visible. Because even just within the last 4 years, there's been so much change in the culture and the visibility. And I think it's just incredible to see because there is a really dark history in the church and at BYU. And so it's kind of a hard thing to talk about and to acknowledge, because a lot of people outside of the LGBTQ plus community aren't even aware of it. They have no idea what's gone on. They don't know the hurt. They don't know the trauma that we've had to endure. It's kind of just been silent. But within just the last couple of years, so many people have stepped up and said, hey, no, I'm a part of this community. I'm proud of who I am, and this is my experience. And it's I think it's changing the culture, which in turn will change like institution and policy, because people are talking about it, and we're realizing, wow, these are like our loved ones. These aren't just some outside community that I have no connection with. These are people that I'm living with, that I'm close to. They're in my classes. And it's amazing to see. It's kind of just exponentially changed over the last couple of years. So,
and that actually sort of leads me into what is our second question, which had to deal with things like Rainbow Day, which Bradley, you were very much behind, which is super exciting. I looked at all the pictures and everything, to encourage people on the campus to be more supportive of LGBTQ plus students. you know, as you all look at this, because you're all coming from the BYU campus at different points, do you think that this is a really significant step when we look back at this? Are we going to say this was one of those moments where things began to really change? And what do you think now needs to happen from the administration? Because I mean, I think finding out you have 1,000 kids on campus who identify differently certainly is something of a call to action in my mind. So what do you think about this? And anyone, again, who wants to start, I'm good with that.
I think it's really wonderful. I told Brad earlier this week, we just had tears in our eyes. We just were so excited to see that Y lit up with colorful flashlights. I want him to talk a little bit about how that happened. There's still a long ways to go. It is exciting, the study showing that more students are feeling safe enough to come out, at least in a survey, at least in an anonymous survey, to say that they are something other than straight. And the numbers really are mirroring what the Gallup poll for 2020 showed, that it's Generation Z. I have a hard time keeping track of who's who, but the kids born between 97 and 2002, that it was something like 11.5% came out as bisexual on that Gallup survey, and 2% is gay, and about 1.5% is lesbian, and about 1.8, I think, as trans. So our numbers are very close in this anonymous sample, which was a pretty big sample size, but still it makes us think, well, I think that's very positive news. You would expect that LDS kids are no different than any other group in the incidence of LGBTQ people. And so that's showing that. I was going to say there is a student association called USGA, which is Understanding Sexuality, Gender, and Allyship. And they meet off campus. They don't yet have a on-campus club status by the university. So, and they meet at a public library in a conference area or large room. So these are things that I think it would be wonderful to see them have a budget from the university, to have like other clubs, to be able to have space on the university to meet. I would love to see that as one positive step forward.
It would be an affirmation, I think. And Chelsea, I mean, because you just sort of talked about going back and realizing that maybe it wasn't the best place for you. So as you look at these changes, what are you seeing, and what do you think?
I think the main issue with BYU is the same issue that the church has, which is that it's very much top down. Like, no matter how much of a groundswelling of people are like, hey, this is a problem, unless the prophet, the guy at the very top, acknowledges, okay, we need to do something about this, then institutionally there can be no change, because we have very little power as individual members to affect like widespread change. That being said, when and there was in that Daily Universe article reference to sort of a gathering last year when the honor code seemed like it changed, and then they decided, just kidding, it didn't change. And there was a protest, really, of kids and signs, and like I saw so many of my friends sharing images of that, friends who have had no interest in like Mormon spaces or anything like that for years, because they just didn't feel that spiritual need anymore or connection to something that had hurt them so much. But they were seeing this, and it's happened again with the rainbow Y pictures of just people saying, this really touched me, like this means something. So Bradley, I'm sure you're aware, like that really was historic. Like BYU has never, ever seen something like that. And that means we've never seen it. None of the queer alums have ever seen something like that, because we didn't feel like we could. And that is definitely a huge change right there, of course, that they felt like they could. I think there are more students who are queer than said they were on that survey, because I guarantee there are more who were terrified they would somehow be found out, or thought it was going to turn out to be a witch hunt or something, and didn't want to answer truthfully. Like it's definitely a higher number. But Rebecca, your hopes, I think those are reasonable, like, because you have proven, especially with that rainbow Y, that these kids are not just going to go away. you know, and conservative donors might, you know, make angry phone calls, but they can't ignore this community anymore. And I think that's really, you know, that's, you got that shoe, that foot in the door, and that's so important. I'm going to be so great.
It is, and it's exciting. And I have to say, as somebody who is Catholic, I can understand what it's like to be in a religious environment where it is very top down. It sounds so familiar. So familiar. Bradley, so you were behind the big rainbow Y. So could you tell us a little bit about how it happened,
and I think
what the experience was? Can we see it?
I think you can actually see it right over there. It's about 380 feet tall, so it's huge. But it was incredible. So I have a lot I want to mention and talk about. So I started Color the Campus a couple years ago because I noticed that on campus in this environment, there's a lot of people that feel very confident and secure in their ignorance and their hate and queer phobia towards the LGBTQ plus community. They have no problem whatsoever saying things in class, saying things to their roommates. Even professors will say
professors as well. Professors and your bishopric members, your spiritual leaders.
Yeah, it's rampant, and everybody. It's a very harmful environment because people are so closeted, and yet they can't even stand up for themselves. They can't defend themselves. They're just hearing these terrible things said about them and to them. And so I wanted to create a space where we could first educate people on what was going on and why the things that were being said were wrong, and then also for allies to stand up and be like, hey, no, there is a community here that will support you. That obviously includes the LGBTQ plus community because we're all trying to be allies to one another as well. But that's like the main audience and the main focus is for allies. So that's why I created Color the Campus, and I started Rainbow Days once a semester where people wear rainbow to be like, hey, I'm an ally. I'm someone you can come talk to. I'm someone you can sit with. You can come out to me. I'm a safe person. And there's been a lot of great change with that. And one thing that I wanted to mention that Chelsea kind of talked about is kind of this top down. I noticed that very quickly that, I mean, I've been a part of the church my whole life. And so that is kind of how it is. So I decided that I wanted to focus a little bit more on the culture and create this space where people can start having discussions because that top down institutional change is so difficult. But if we can get people to start talking about it and to be understanding, even if there are harmful policies, at least we have loving people and people there to support and to protect these students that feel like they don't have a place. And so as far as like moving forward, I really want BYU to reach out to these students and listen to us because we have a lot of things to say. And also like the emphasis on intersectionality. We have a lot of people of color on campus, a lot of disabled people on campus, interfaith, international. Like there's so many different marginalized communities at BYU that are a part of the LGBTQ plus community and outside of that community that need a space where they can feel like they can have a voice. And so I want BYU to start listening to us and actually talk to us and understand the harm that they have.
You know, you made talking about the harm, I think, is a really significant thing because one of the pieces in the article that we're using this week mentions that the researchers found that LGBTQ students at BYU were 2 times more likely to have suicidal thoughts than their heterosexual peers. And, you know, there's been a lot of research done in faith spaces about what makes people consider change. And one of the biggest change factors is I find out that something I'm doing in my religious practice is hurting someone else. And that tends to be the beginning of change for a lot of people. So I would like to talk a little bit about, because I know I've seen a lot of questions, so I want to leave some time for that. But I want to talk about what people can be doing. So all 3 of you, again, are sort of coming from different places in this conversation, but all rolling up to the same thing, that there does need to be the conversation and there do need to be more supportive spaces. So what can people do inside the LDS community who want to be more supportive? What are those concrete things that sort of the everyday person listening to this can start doing right now that are accessible to them, sort of rolling up to those bigger things? And since we seem to be having an order, I might see, Rebecca, if you have any suggestions first, and then we can kind of work around like we've been doing.
Yeah. I think one of the first things is just to realize that in any group you're in, know that some of the people in your audience or in your family are LGBTQ. Assume that. And And whether, I think in families, if I could say whether these are your grandchildren or your future children or nieces or nephews or whatever interaction you have with children, especially, to never say and do things that you will regret later when your sweet little nephew tells you that he's gay or that she is lesbian or whatever. I think if I could sit down anybody before they even have children or anyone who works with kids to say, be careful, every class that every group has some LGBTQ people, and know that. And I think just learn to listen, learn to ask questions. Learn, our church is unique in that we have a huge emphasis on the family. Where in our theology, there's this concept of the eternal family and gender roles, where we have a patriarchal system in the church and church leadership. So these are things that create pain points for our LGBTQ members, where so I think we need to be aware when we have classes divided by gender, all these things to try to be supportive, just be a friend. I would like leaders in the church to really listen to LGBTQ people and for youth to listen to their parents and be supportive. Just more like, how can we support you? How can we make this be a really comfortable place for you? Those kinds of questions. I remember there was a family that I admire very much, a Catholic family, but their little girl wore a suit to her first communion. And that family just supported her. That was what she wanted to wear. And it was just darling. And I think we could take that example. I know there are things I said when my son was young, partly thinking, oh, the kids will bully you if you're too feminine, or I don't want you to play with these toys or something like that. And a lot of us have made those mistakes where later we thought, oh gosh, that was so harmless. And it's better to support them to be who they are. Yeah, I'll let Chelsea.
Thank you. But I mean, so much of that is important. And I think some of it you don't necessarily think about, like the gender segregated spaces, which is sort of a step up, but an important one. Chelsea, suggestions for people about what they should be doing, sort of your everyday activism.
Two things came to mind, which is one of them being, I'm guessing this is probably maybe true in other faith traditions, but a lot of Mormons are extremely hesitant to criticize leadership. We have two what are called general conferences a year, where the leaders of the church give talks, and they're televised to everybody around the world who is in the church. And often there are homophobic talks. And I try to encourage my friends who still go to church and listen to these conferences. If somebody asks, so what did you think of the conference? Tell them, this talk made me uncomfortable, and you can pick out other positive things to highlight if that makes you feel better too. But don't just sit there quietly and say, well, I better not bring it up because I don't want to ruffle any feathers, because I think oftentimes that will stick with people and they'll remember, oh, maybe I can go talk to that person, because she seemed to understand homophobia is bad. That seems really simple, but it can be really nerve-wracking for people to want to say, I thought this apostle was incorrect or this leader was wrong. And the other thing is I think some people try to, I don't want to say they're overly trying to be an ally, but when I was first navigating coming out, there were people in my life who were trying to pressure me to, oh, can I tell, this part of the family, they won't care and it'll be fine. And, and I appreciated that they were excited for me, but I felt very pressured because I just thought, I kind of really want to do this in my own time and space. And my reasons may be arbitrary to you, but I have them, so support them by being there when they're ready. And if they tell you, yeah, go ahead, tell anyone I don't care, then do that. But if they say, please let me tell who I want to tell, then respect that, and you're good.
Thank you for saying that. I have had teach so many classes, and people are like, "But I want them to know they can come out to everyone." I'm like, "No, that's not how it works. That's not how it works. It's in their opinion." Thank you for saying that. Bradley, tell us about what you think people should be doing now, because we have some really good suggestions.
Yeah, I have a lot of thoughts on this as well. I think one of the main things, well, I guess a few. One is to not make assumptions about people, because you have these stigmas, you have these preconceived notions about what it means to be LGBTQ plus. Especially when someone comes out to you, don't assume that they aren't going to be like that. They're having questions about their faith, or that they're being sexually promiscuous, and like all these things. Don't assume that you know what it's like to be a member of the LGBTQ plus community, and just listen to them. And then additionally, I think it's kind of your choice to be either an advocate for them or be an obstacle. Like, you have to there's no middle ground anymore. You either have to stand up for them, or being complacent is kind of going to just be more difficult for them. And then I also think I lost my train of thought there. I think one of the main things that I would have liked to see is just kind of recognizing that you're going to make mistakes, and that's okay. But what matters is that you are trying, and that you're willing to listen. And don't, how do I phrase this? Often when I talk to people, they make suggestions on what they want me to do. I'm like, oh, so are you going to still do X, Y, and Z and do this? Like, just trust that they know what is good for them, especially from a religious setting, because I still have a very strong relationship with God and my faith, and I interact with that in different ways than other people do. And so trust that I know what's best for me, and don't give me suggestions on what you think I should do. Oh, well, as long as you don't act on it, then things will be good. As long as you don't do this. No, let me make those decisions for myself, because I know what I need. And then also, like, what does that even mean? Don't act on it. Like, does that mean don't date? Does that mean don't have sex? Like, it's so vague. No one really knows. Let me be the one to determine that. So.
Thank you. Thank you. I am actually going to ask Jamie if she will pop back in, because I peeked over to the conversation and there have been a lot of questions. Jamie, I think we could probably squeeze one question in before we go. And you're still muted. She really
vacation brain. I have vacation brain. I'm sorry. I am going to pull up one question that came up reasonably early in the show and in the conversation. Somebody was wondering if you could talk just a little bit more about, maybe from your personal experience, what you have seen happen to folks that have been excommunicated or have been expelled from BYU because of their sexual orientation or gender identity. Like, in your personal experiences, what has that been like for folks?
I can just quickly say, to kind of echo what Brad said, we shouldn't assume we know what the path will be for anyone. And so some people do step away and out for their own mental health. And other people who leave in a more, I should say, unwelcome way, like being excommunicated. I would like to see that end, because I think it's really traumatic for people. A lot of people have church-related trauma from these kinds of things. I know many people who have moved on to live very wonderful, happy, moral lives after Mormonism. And I think that's also good to know. But I think it can be very traumatic to be pushed out of your community. So I'd like to see that.
There's definitely a difference, right, between people who choose to leave and, technically resign, like have their names withdrawn from the records of the church because they're like, I don't want this in my life anymore. I'm ready to move on. I'm done. Versus someone who is maybe hanging on because they really still want to be there, or family really wants them to be there, or they're trying to please someone by just saying, okay, whatever, like, fine, I'll still be here, but I won't go to church. And so that excommunication can be very traumatizing because you're being expelled from what you've been taught to see as, you know,
It's
the way
hope.
to God. It's hard. It's hard.
The church has softened. The church has softened some of this language from not saying excommunication, but saying removal of membership or membership restrictions. But it's still the same thing. So
it's still alienation. It's alienation, no matter what word you call it. I hate having to do this, but we have actually hit the end of the show. It kills me every week. I keep thinking we should do this for an hour, but nobody needs to see this face for an hour. So I want to thank you all, Bradley, Chelsea, Rebecca. First of all, thank you so much for jumping in and just doing the best show. But thank you all for the things that you are doing. You are saving lives and you are changing lives and changing your community. And that is really exciting stuff. We hope that we'll talk about this again, and I'd love for you to come back and talk a little bit more, but thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.
And thank you, Jamie, once again. Well, everybody, that gets us to the end of one more show. We'll be back next week with, if you can believe it, our 1-year anniversary. That's right. We're going to have a second season, people. Nobody wanted a second season, but here we are still in quarantine. Anyway, we end the show the same way every single week, but I'm just going to mention this. Remember, you can be an advocate or an obstacle. I really love that. So the way we end every week is to remind you to run fast, laugh hard, and be kind. And please, 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 no matter where you are or what you are doing, please continue to wear your masks. We'll be back next week. Take care of yourselves, everybody. We'll see you next week.